All right, so it's been 10 weeks exactly since I was here in Columbus, the first time that we met for the initial assessment.
So my hiding on Instagram didn't work really well.
Dave is one of these guys that is currently fucked up, and we are going to try to rebuild Dave Tate. You know, over the years, trashing the body, doing world-class things under the bar, it takes its toll. Dave's dealing with some big orthopedic issues, and after going through some of his medical history, some of his training history, and his current training status, we have some work to do. That's why I'm here at the elitefts headquarters, and we're going to be spending an entire day assessing, evaluating, and getting a game plan to move Dave Tate forward.
All right, so it's been 10 weeks exactly since I was here in Columbus, the first time that we met for the initial assessment. We've been through two phases of training, two successful phases of training, and then around the first week of March or so, the check-ins, the 5,000 word check-ins every week kind of came to a cease. Also, the videos kind of fell off a little bit. So I just need to know, like, what's been going on the last couple weeks in terms of training, in terms of life, and just get me updated so we can kind of make some intelligent decisions when we program this third phase.
So my hiding on Instagram didn't work really well. So I posted some of the videos on Instagram. I think this is important to discuss because I think other people will run into this, and it's just kind of a life type of thing. But beginning of March, the Honor Classic hit. You know, so that for us, while we don't necessarily go there, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And it was also Parents' Weekend for my son's school. So I'm trying to jam pack in as much as I can before I have to leave to go out of town. So that kind of screwed up that weekend. And most of my training is focused on the weekend. So that was one of those cases where I couldn't slide Saturday to Friday and Sunday to Monday just because of travel and all this other kind of stuff. And as I move forward here, I understand all this is going to sound like excuses, but let me get through the excuses first and then talk about how I kind of managed that. That gave me a week after that to kind of get things back on track, so that really wasn't that much of a big deal, but there were sessions lost during that time period. The cardio was still done. It was just done walking around the campus of my son's school or just typical tours and that kind of stuff. Then we went into the March 12th, which was my other son's spring break to Florida. And that was during the week. So the weekend wasn't affected at all. And then during the week, basically nothing was done. You know, we were in his grandparents' house with a pool that really was not operational. He was fine, you know, getting away. This is my autistic son, so this is more about him than it is about me. So if he's fine just getting away and doing all that kind of stuff, it is what it is. Me, on the other hand, was bored out of my mind, so I started doing, as I typically do when I'm on vacation, I'll do a deep dig into some aspect of work that I'm responsible for, and found that I dropped the ball on a couple issues, which ended up being 12, 13-hour work days while I was down there, which I'm not complaining about because it's better than watching The Price is Right. But when I find things like that from a professional standpoint and there are no distractions, I want to just get in, get it done, no matter what it's going to take. And there's a lot of, I don't think during that stuff, like I'm not thinking, okay, get up, go for a walk. It's let's just get this fucking shit done. And then the next thing you know, 10, 12 hours gone by. So that was kind of the whole week there. So by the time I got back that weekend, I was able to train that weekend. But now we're talking about a lot of lost cardiovascular days.
Yep.
You know, so I started to feel the deconditioning on the 16th from the aerobic capacity, because that.
Where did you feel it most? In your training sessions itself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Being able to get the number of sets and reps done. That's typically, it's where I feel it the most now. It's not where I felt it before, but it's where I feel it the most now. Then at that point, on the 19th, I realized that I had to go back out of town to a supplier for the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd. So pretty much for the whole week. Those again were from what time did we get up? It was like 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning, like 8 till midnight, for that whole week there. Mm-hmm. So there was no training except walking around, the manufacturing plant, which I tried to do more consciously,
yep.
But still, when I came back to train, actually that weekend when I came back, we had the sport training summit. So I didn't even have the weekend
yep.
to be able to get things back on point with that. So that pretty much brings that whole month through there. So there was a lot of shit going on, which I just kind of consider life when you own a company. Everybody
yep.
thinks it's, great and grand, but shit sometimes comes out of the blue and you're responsible for making sure you get it done. And in the past, 10, 15 years ago, training still would have taken first priority, but at this point, it doesn't.
Right.
The work has to take the first priority. So I was where I fell short on the things that I could have done that I didn't do were the floor work, the recovery work,
yep.
all that stuff I could have done, but just chose not to. And I don't want to say that I have no excuse for that. I don't want to say I just didn't remember doing it. I just didn't do it.
It's the all or none mentality. It's either I'm going to do things the way it's programmed or I'm not going to do anything at all. It's the way we're hardwired.
So that's something that's got to change. But being back kind of in rhythm now for a couple weeks.
Before you move on to that, I just want to try to objectify this a little bit. So we had the month of March, we had 28 sessions because we're doing something every single day. There's some sort of training going on every single day for you. Out of those 28 training sessions, we have 14 to 16 lifts. So how many lifts did you actually get in through the month of March?
Probably average of 2 to 3 a week.
Okay, so we cut down by 50% there. Were you putting more of an emphasis on your max effort days or your dynamic effort days?
It didn't matter. It was just whatever day it falls on.
Okay.
Now
so you're mixing in those?
Yeah, but there was a lot more conscious effort put on the recovery process, as far as what am I available and ready to do.
Okay.
So if I wasn't prepared to do any type of maximal strain, then it moved to dynamic, which meant, okay, what's going on that weekend? Or shuffling it around, like I know I'm going to be out of town this weekend, so I have to do the max effort during the week because I'll have a spotter where on the weekend I won't. But everything still got done. Like when I was in the gym, the warm-up still got done. The cool-down restoration still got done. Probably more time even on the restoration part.
Okay.
Because it became more critical.
Right.
That had to be done because it wasn't going to be done on the following day. So most of those kind of fell in there. I think there was a little bit of a peak in the strength throughout March because a lot of the other stuff did fall out. So in a way, I kind of peaked without knowing that I peaked.
Right.
Which is interesting because I really wasn't training the max effort or the dynamic in any type of way to elicit any result.
We didn't have a short-term goal to peak. We have more of that longevity mindset right now. So it's just incremental changes. Yeah.
Yeah. So and we'll talk more about the dynamic in this max effort work, but it's not leading to any end objective. Right. Which gives me more flexibility, but yet less because you're restricting movement patterns. Right. So those got done. The supplementals got done. Even the stupid shit got done. So all that stuff got done. It's just the off days. Right. The first days that were the hardest to put in. Right. Actually became the hardest to keep in.
And that's one thing. High performance lifestyle is tough. Many of the clients that I deal with are like yourself. Super high performance in the business world, in the physical world. They want to train meaningfully. They're doing everything at a very, very high level. But sometimes life does happen. It takes a shit and you have to deal with it. But I'm very much so like you. 10 years ago, I would go, hey, I'm not going to train whatsoever if I can't train on my program. Yeah. But over the course of the last couple of years, traveling more, doing far more things, out of town, it's almost to the point where restoration becomes the key factor, because what is number one for you right now? Number one for you right now is being a CEO of Elite FTS and being able to have that high performance in your lifestyle. But I think as you go through these processes, you'll depend more on restoring your neural capabilities, restoring your mental outlooks, and actually depending on some of this more secondary stuff. And that truly becomes the non-negotiable as opposed to the training itself. Many times, like say you have those 8 o'clock to midnight days. For many of our clients, if we can do 10 to 20 minutes of work, that is an absolute non-negotiable. It happens by waking up 20 minutes earlier, doing your 6-phase warm-up in your hotel room, literally like anything that you have. Usually we'll travel with like a bullshit foam roller, one that you can stuff socks in between, or at least have a band with you. You do 10 minutes there and you go for a 10-minute walk, even if it's around the hotel. I've done this in the past too. At that point in time, you get 10 plus minutes of your cardiovascular work done. That's really our baseline. We need 10 plus minutes of your feet actually moving consistently for it to actually count as CV work. That coupled with your warm-up, that's your restoration. So you have those base things done in a matter of 20 minutes, even if you're working a 14-hour day. And that becomes something that's almost a non-negotiable lifestyle factor, is I'm gonna get this stuff done because I know I'm gonna depend on it when it's 11 at night. I don't feel like being here anymore, and I know that I got my work done in the day. For me, it's always like, I wanna get my work done that's personal to me so I can go out and put my business first and foremost when I actually get to the point where that's the goal. So using that and being okay with that, that's totally fine, because I know how hard it is to go and find a gym that has what you need in it to actually knock out some of these max effort or dynamic effort days. Like, it's close to impossible. What are you gonna wake up at 4 a.m. and go do that? Maybe.
No,
but most people aren't gonna do that.
No.
So at least getting this 20 minutes in and just getting to the point where you can maintain. So when you get back to your schedule, you don't fall off the cliff.
Yeah, and I've always scheduled the bigger days on Saturday and Sunday,
right?
For this very reason, because I've lived this life forever, so that way, if I have to travel on the weekend, Saturday goes to Friday, it's easy to bump things around.
Right.
And usually I'm always home on the weekends.
Right.
It just so happened that this was one of those months where the weekends were not for 2 of the weeks.
Yeah, the multiple
We're
events.
not that option. But usually if I can get the bigger stuff done on the weekend, finding that time, like you're talking about during the week, shouldn't be a problem. And there were, I had to drive 10 hours. So there was walking around, rest areas, for 15 minutes, something around, it depends upon, I don't time shit. It's just like, it's a big rest area. I'm going to walk around the whole thing.
Right.
Or, so it doesn't put me too far behind. I'm not going to sit there and walk for an hour. But that's being done not only for the aerobic capacity, but it's a long ass drive. So if I'm not stopping at every rest area and moving, then it's going to be not good by the time I get there. So some of that's there, but the stuff in the hotel room I could do. It's stuff I used to tell my personal training clients to do. I just have never done it.
The way that we programmed out your first 2 phases of training too, we have mixed energy systems development work in. So we have that long, more slow rate. So we have like your walking and that kind of stuff. That one's easy to get done, whether you're walking before outside or whatever. But those other 2 kind of days, we have more of like an interval style day where we're escalating the heart rate up and working hard to get it back down. That's something that even if you're in a hotel, you can knock out on a freaking stationary bike just to get some ESD work in that capacity. And then that true, more functional energy systems work, the carries, things like that, the circuits, that's going to be tough to get in, but you could also do that even, I hate training in the hotel room, but at least having like a hotel gym, you could have something at your disposal and be able to just knock out some movement patterns and even couple it in with the 6-phase warm-up, again, within about 20 minutes. Yeah. So those are things to keep in mind, because like you made the right decision of like, hey, I need to get my walking in, that's first and foremost, that's like your base. But we need to also be doing these other kind of energy systems development just so they don't, again, fall off the cliff. When you go to depend on them, you can't get your training volume in, you can't get your relative intensities up in the gym. Those are hard things to deal with, but we have to keep in mind that as quickly as you can bring your CV up, you can also bring it back down.
Oh, it's fast.
So, it takes 4 to 6 weeks minimum to put on muscle mass or really to peak neurological response in a big compound movement pattern. it only takes a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks to get a huge notable change in the way that you're able to breathe, monitor your heart rate, bring it up, bring it down strategically. So that thing, it can get good, it can get bad very, very quickly, but it's something to take into account, because it's not like, oh man, all this work that I just did, it's not there anymore. It'll bounce back very, very quickly because you have it in your system.
For me, it dived in a week, but
yeah,
I don't think that a lot of the viewers really understood how far of a deficit I was starting from. So it took the first 2 training cycles just to get, actually I think we had to pull a lot of the other intervals and all that stuff we had to pull out because the deconditioning was so bad that...
If you don't mind touching upon like that first phone call that we did in December, you know, you said a couple things about just like your activities of daily living, having to do with stairs or with walking down the street. Are you cool with like actually putting that on record and saying kind of the level where your conditioning was at before we started working together?
Yeah, I can put that on record because I think it's it's a misunderstood thing, but at the same time, I'm not going to go on record and say, you know, all the extenuating circumstances that fell behind that. But I will say it all started with a hip replacement, but throughout 2017, I might have had 3 or 4 decent training weeks that were strung together in a row.
Yeah.
There were a lot of weeks I tried, but wasn't able to do it. So the deconditioning got to a point where, you know, just getting up a flight of stairs was not easy to do.
Yep.
Getting out of a chair. I mean, a lot of the things were just not easy to do, and it was just a full deconditioning. So a lot of people have asked, you know, why did you bring John on? Why did you bring John on? It's like, it's not 100% all because of this, you know, fixing the orthopedic issues. You know, there were deconditioning issues that probably, speaking with my family this past weekend, I've probably never been that deconditioned in my life. You know, I mean, we're like, well, what about junior high? What about in grade school? I'm like, well, I was a kid, you know, I was playing. I've never had a time where just walking to the end of the driveway was like a pain in the ass to do. So there were, like I said, there were a lot of other circumstances associated with that, you know, from a medical standpoint that have all turned around, but it was going from, you know, shit, you know,
truly zero, a level of zero.
Going from shit to sock,
yeah,
you know, from that time period. And when you're trying, and when that aerobic base falls so bad, usually if you know what you're doing and you're a decent strength athlete, your aerobic base is going to be a couple clicks higher than what you really need it.
Right.
So 2 weeks vacation, you actually peak. You know, 1 week vacation, you'll peak. You know, that now if it's right where it needs to be, you know, say old school equalizer, you have all these different, you know, dials, you know, and here's your aerobic dial. Say for strength athlete, it needs to be 0, not -1, but 0. You know, strength has to be 10, flexibility has to be 4, mobility, you know, so if that falls to -1, you're fucked. You know, you're just fucked. Now, if you can keep it at 2, which isn't too much to where it's going to inhibit the strength, but it's not too little that just taking a break for a week knocks you off par.
Right.
Where I was able to get before life kind of hit in March was maybe 1 notch above.
Yeah.
So it was cool for it was cool for about a week, but then that second week hit, then I started to notice it with the accessories and the training. You know, or how many warm-up repetitions I could do on the major lifts. You know, so the simple compromise for a meathead is, well, let's just use all singles to warm up. You know, so you start you compensate, you know, for it instead of trying to fix it. But I realized real quick, this is not the issue. To compensate for the issue is just going to spin me back. So it was forcing at that point the accessories, while having to actually pull back a little bit on the max effort to have the energy to be able to force the accessories.
Right.
Which when we talk about the different methods, we'll talk about that a little bit. But it still ended up being a step back, which I thought needed to be discussed, because if we were to have done this in the beginning of March, we probably would have had a phase 3
Right.
in March instead of phase 2.1, which was basically just phase 2 with me repeating it, with just very little changes of variables to get things back kind of where they are, to where I would say now it's maybe 1 or 2 weeks at most of being where it would have, I'd say a week, at where it would have been at beginning of March. So it comes back, it comes back quick too, which I think people need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
As long as you don't have 7 months of inactivity, to where you're fucked.
I think a couple of key things that you said really, really important. I like that dialing analogy. So say if you're a strength athlete, you want your strength and your power dialed up to 10. You might want to have, mobility at like a 4 or so, like you said, but you can't always have your endurance or your cardiovascular abilities at 0, because if shit happens, you go down into the red and it's really hard to pull yourself out of that hole. And when you go down into that red, that means that your 10 strength also falls down as well. You can't get meaningful accessory work in. You can't push your sets and your volume to the point where you can actually get an elicited response from it. So my recommendations is always like minimum viable dose. What is the one dose that we can give from like a energy systems development standpoint that will supplement in your primary goals? But for generalized life and longevity, like we really need to have some buffer room. So if you do have a week, 2 weeks, we don't again fall off that cliff. We're just on the edge of it where we can pull ourselves back. We have to have that buffering room. And that's something that over time that we can develop more and more. But again, it is a trade-off. I'm not going to lie here and say that, strength is going to be at max capacity if we bring, your endurance up to a 3, 4, or a 5. But for the next 20 to 30 years of your training career, being dependent on that, knowing that life's going to come, shit's going to hit the fan, and you are going to have these times of automatic life deloading that we can get back in without having been in the red.
Well, I'm not a strength athlete anymore either. So my aerobic capacity, and I almost hate to use the word aerobic capacity because strength athletes aren't going to really understand. And when you say cardiovascular, they're going to think that it's cardiovascular. If you just think of it as circulation training, you're training your body to be able to circulate nutrients to help you recover. That's how I've always
Another way you can think about it is breathing training. What makes you breathe hard? What makes you breathe at a less rate? So monitoring your breathing, your respiratory rates, that's really what you're training.
Yeah, so my strength doesn't ever have to be a 10.
Right.
Ever. Nor is it going to be. I'm not going to break any all-time records. Just that falls with being a meathead. But, a 6, I'm cool with a 6, which gives room for that. It's anytime you start fucking with an equalizer too much, push too many things all the way to the top, distortion.
Right.
You're trying to find the right harmony, between all these different variables. So as soon as one moves, another one has to move. So if I bring the strength down, it gives room to bring, the aerobic. Right. Actually, there's different aerobic knobs, but one of the, the aerobic knobs up a little bit, where if they all get pushed up, the strength obviously falls down. It's an interesting. We can go on and on and on about that forever because flexibility falls in there, mobility falls in there, and all these different things fall in there for each different athlete.
Right.
Every athlete has their own song, their own rhythm, their own beat, of what it is, and their own rate of distortion. What you don't want to have is everything on 0, right? Because then you're dead.
I like to challenge people and be like, if you were hospitalized for 2 to 4 weeks, literally you were on bed rest, could you actually get out and live a meaningful life after that? And it really comes down to having 4 key variables that you always have to keep at a base level. One is strength, like there's no faking strength. Second one is body composition. Third one is some sort of mobility and flexibility, however you want to call that one. And then the last one, maybe the most important one for systemic health, is again your endurance. Overall endurance. So keeping those 4 different metrics at a base level. It's a conversation I had with Coach Charles Staley. Dude's almost 60 right now, and he's working on these 4 physical metrics over and over again. He's doing really well because his mindset is, again, being the best at 70, being the best at 80, and monitoring all 4 of these things simultaneously and trying to actually get a synergy. What's the base minimum viable dose that we can get a baseline level of all of these going at once? That's the goal.
Having been in that exact situation several times.
Yeah. So what are the ones that? Mental, yeah.
I put mental health as first because
Yep.
your humanity gets tested. You know, it's just to not be able to go to the bathroom by yourself.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of things get tested that normally wouldn't be. You know, so just your mental health and your mental capacity to realize, you know, first off, do you want to live or not? You know, because most people would just, it's easy to quit because when it's that bad,
Yeah.
it's bad. So if you don't have that, which falls into somewhat of a healthy nutrient profile, the best that you can be for being 4 weeks in the hospital or 4 weeks sick, which the hospital food is not the most nutrient-rich food in the world, but a lot of hospitals now are sugar-free. So, you know, just to get a real Coke, somebody's got to sneak it in. You know, which you can still, you can still do that, but you're not going to be sitting there pounding it 24/7.
Right.
You know, because if your mind is polluted, you know, it's already being polluted with the drugs. It's already being polluted because it doesn't have the oxygen. It's to have your digestion's getting fucked up because you're not moving. Everything that normally works normal, nothing's working normal.
Right.
Which makes your brain not work normal. You know, so that's kind of, to me, it's the cornerstone, because you have to decide, you know, this is either going to change the way I live my life forever, you know, where say you're paralyzed or whatever it's going to be, and you got to deal with that at some point, or it's going to change the way you're going to live your life, you know, forever, or you're going to make it, you're going to come back 100%. And sometimes you don't even know those answers while you're laying in that bed. So you have to deal with that and try to, and I'm still a trained geek, you know, try to not produce more cortisol because you're trying to heal.
Yeah.
You know, so the whole time, this is how much of a fucking geek I am. So the whole time you're laying in hospital bed, you're like breathing, trying to meditate, like no cortisol, just chill, you know, and try to find that balance to be able to think. Because at the same time, you got to make decisions.
Yeah.
You know, where a lot of assumptions get made when you're in there. But with that one exception, all those other qualities are huge, because your aerobic base is going to fall. You're not going to be able to walk from your bed to the door. It's going to have to be rebuilt. But it comes back fast if you're coming from a decent aerobic base.
Right.
Your strength takes a long time to fall.
Yeah, it does.
So you still have to learn how to sit up. You know, your abs better be strong. So when you're talking about strength, your core better be strong. Like your core and your triceps are critical, because you got to be able to get up, you got to be able to sit down.
Yep.
You know, it's not so, everybody thinks it's the legs. It's not so much the legs, because if you can't sit the fuck up, you ain't standing on. And then from there, but
It's an issue to, you know, we're looking at like the most grim side of things, like being at bed rest for 4 weeks. But any sort of forced change into the system, usually that's the stimulus that kind of wake people the fuck up. Like, hey, something needs to change here, again, because I'm at risk of being able to do what I want to do, having that being taken away. Whether it be an injury in the gym, whether it be an injury in life, whether it be systemic health issues, whether it be hospital bed rest, it's usually that point in time that, again, it gives you the time and the clarity to be like, what I'm doing may not be the most ideal thing right now, and maybe I need to make some intelligent steps forward to actually change the trajectory that I'm on.
yes.
So that's kind of where we're at too. I mean, those are the first kind of conversations that we had, you know, going from a very deconditioned level, not being able to string meaningful training together for essentially 12 straight months, and fast forwarding that 10 weeks to literally posting Instagram videos that people were like jaw dropping at. Huge amount of change in a 10-week period, knowing very well that we started down at a base level of 0 on many of these physical qualities. And even with the orthopedic standing, we had some things to work on. But I mean, there's been a huge amount of improvements across the board, from every Instagram video that I see, every video that you text me, the 5,000 word dissertations that I've given every single week. There's a lot of improvements there, but like the dorks in us want to go, oh, like what was your squat? Did your squat improve? Did your deadlift improve? I don't really give a shit about that. The things that I cared about from like a quality of life standpoint, 3 different things. The first one is you sent me the trap bar deadlift video. You're supposed to do 1 speed single, and you had like 15 bands on there. You had chains on there. I don't even know how you could quantify the load that was on the bar, but it was impressive. And you were supposed to do a 1. You ripped it for 13. I was kind of impressed by the 13. I was like, all right, cool. But then because you don't cut any of your videos when you send them to me, they're 15 minutes long. You walk over off the platform and you start talking about 30 seconds after that max effort.
No. I thought I was gonna get 1.
It was unbelievable. You were literally like talking into the camera, giving me an update 30 seconds after you just did a total time under tension of 37 seconds with a huge amount of load explosively with a belt and 2 hoodies on. The average person couldn't have talked after that. And 10 weeks later, you're talking after a set like that. I took my phone, I showed my wife, and my wife's like, whoa, that's pretty heavy. I'm like, no, watch this after. And then you start talking into the camera and we're both like, wow. Like that speaks volumes. Again, with your respiratory rate, being able to talk, that talking rate, it's unbelievable. Second thing was the video that you sent me of the floor press. Voop, down on the floor like a cat, voop, up off the floor like a cat. And everyone in the comments was like, they didn't care about how much weight was on the bar. They're like, I've never seen Dave get up like that. We were just talking to Matt Goodwin out there before we got in here. Matt's like, I've never seen Dave move on and down to the floor like that in my life. And I think he's seen you train a couple decades now. That was super meaningful to me because we forced you to get down onto the floor, like the most unsexy things in the world. Hey, can I foam roll with a stick from a seated position? Like, no, get your ass on the floor. And just getting up and down, like the most basic of things, really just started to dial in to the point where you're just popping up.
Well, you put I think I even sent you an email about you fucking put like 1 floor thing and then a standing thing and then a floor thing
it's
again.
Strategic.
I'm like, why don't we just do the floor shit? I'm here, let's just do the floor shit while I'm down here and get it done, and then I'll get up and do the other stuff. And then you posted, you sent back, well, this is on purpose. I'm like, motherfucker.
Yeah. So, it's getting you to do things automatically that you have to do just from a sequencing standpoint. It's little things when you put programming together like that. Nobody would have noticed that, but you noticed it as an athlete having to get up and down again. Somebody to read that on an article to be like, oh, they wouldn't know because they haven't done it. But the secondary goal to that, maybe the primary goal, was just to get up and moving off the floor. Again, developmental-based positions, just moving through them. And it's not like we're doing this for a half hour. We're doing it for 15 minutes before we train. And that one really had a heavy carryover. The last video that I saw, I think it was like this past week, the box squat video. I think you had all the spotters. It was on the weekend. It must have been like a week ago or like 2 weeks ago. And again, you moved some pretty decent weight, but the hip stability was on point. We have a video that's going to be coming out. Actually, by the time this comes out, everyone will have seen it, where the first session that we had you squatting, your hips are going back and forth. Josh highlighted it where there's 0 hip stability on that right hip. It was in the initial session where we did the intake. It was like night and day. Like he highlighted it. It was so blatantly clear. That last squat, it was so solid. You were so spiraled. You were so tension and torque down at the hips. You were floored at the ground. Your bracing was perfect. And then, best thing of all, I think your depth was about 4 inches lower.
Yeah.
And you sat on the box and you didn't plop on it. You maintained tension and stability. And then you just drove up in a rep that made it look easy. When I talk about like sound movement patterns, the kind of thing that you can't tell if it's just the bar or whether there's 600 pounds on the bar. The movement pattern itself looks exactly the same. That looked exactly the same as what we wanted it to look like. So I was just blown away at that. But I mean, many of these different things, sometimes the best way to communicate isn't a 5,000 word essay. It's one video, because we can see so many different things interacting together in a movement pattern. And really that's the key to long-term progress. What looks good, what feels good is ultimately gonna yield a positive result.
Yeah, and there was something that you said in one of the texts or the emails, is before I started sending you the videos, is I was sending you the transcribed, updates, which were long. And then you said a video would be better. I'm like, oh man, I'm not the person.
Then you sent me a video of you talking though. I was like, no, a video of you training.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not the person who's, hit the phone and record my sets. And that's why you got those first ones, because I didn't even know how to trim the fucking video. But then after I saw, I think it was, I don't know, the standing glute bridge, or it's not a standing glute, but you stand and you lift one leg at a time, whatever the hell it's called. Half those things on there I thought were typos. And as soon as I saw the first set, I'm like, oh shit, I can't film that.
Right.
My whole body's rotating. So then I started thinking, wait a minute, if I was to look at somebody's squat and they sent it to me, then I would want to see the video, because that's the only way I'm going to know if they're doing this right. Maybe he's asking to see these movements so he can see if I'm fucking them up like I just did. And then that's when I started sending the videos, but figured, I'm going to post these on Instagram because they're so stupid, and have fun with it, which I've had. And I'm losing my following more and more each day, but that's okay. And I need to lose half of them anyhow. But I understood after that, seeing it myself, and filming it, not even knowing what the mechanics of that. I mean, I know but I don't know what you would be looking for as I would look at a squat. I know that is my movement assessment, is the squat and the bench and the deadlift. So I'm like, oh fuck, this is a train wreck, and I know it's a train wreck.
Right.
But I'm not going to send him this one. I'm going to go back. I'm going to take my time, tighten my abs. I think even on that one, because I didn't clip it, you probably saw me making sure my abs were in the right position, my hips were in the right position, and I took more time to set up.
Right.
And then I realized, and that was probably still in the second cycle of that, is when I realized that, the setup for all the little things, the stupid things that I call them, it's just like the setup for a squat. It all clicked for me with that one stupid video that I shot, because it's just different. But it's
easy to go through the motions, but anytime that you can kind of link up the entire body together with quality-based movement, again, it's just reps. It's reps and it's motor control reps. As much as we can bring more things in and have pristine movement, that's what's going to carry over into the bigger things. And it does seem like what we had you doing was very rudimentary. I mean, you're holding a standing plank position, lifting a leg into extension, but you think if you're pre-rotating there, you're not going to pre-rotate on a lunge or pre-rotate on a deadlift or pre-rotate on your squat? Hell yeah,
I'm just also a person that's never done that before. So when it comes to weight training with those movements, you're dealing with a 4-year-old. You're dealing with a beginner.
Right.
So everything's always been sagittal plane.
Right.
Let's get the whole body to do squat, bench, deadlift. So like I said, some of those things like the paleo press, I remember looking at, and it was a split stance paleo press. And I'm like, this is a fucking typo. This can't be right. So I search it on my phone and I see the video, and the 3 or 4 people in the gym, and all they hear me say is, you gotta be fucking kidding me. I'm like, look at this shit. And then there was another one that was like that as well. But then I kind of got used to, everything's gonna be in a fucking split stance, which sucks. And the rows, I sat right here and told you I don't want to fucking do bodybuilding burpees, and the first thing comes out are the rows. But those I can breathe now.
Yep.
On those. So it's the reason I always hated the rows. People, I don't know if it was in the first video or not, is it's like the superset. You can't breathe, as I call them, bodybuilding burpees. You actually
smoke yourself on the right side, you have to do the left still.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a mountain climber. I mean, you're in a position you can't breathe, then you train, and then you got to stand up, catch your breath, and go down and do it again. But I can breathe through those now as well. So
speaking to the single leg stuff, we had you in split stance a lot. We forced you into split stance, half kneeling positions, split positions. All of a sudden, though, the last video that I saw, you're doing reverse lunges for sets of 12 with no hand assistance, to the point where we're going to start loading those up, and those are going to be a very viable way for us to really get a heavy training effect now.
On that one I tried to see if I could actually do a strip set or a drop set. And
that was impressive to me, because going back to our functional movement screen, you couldn't do one split squat from the bottom up, not one.
Yeah.
and you're doing sets of 12 with a dynamic component, which is far more challenging in a set.
Yeah.
It's just like it was in training. So you're already pre-fatigued, and you just knock those out. But again, it was things bounce back very quickly like that. And you think about the implementation of easy stuff like a half kneeling pale-off press, not a paleo press, but a pale-off press.
Pale-off press, paleo press, it's the same shit.
The paleo press, that's great. But things like that, just grading them in, starting you in a split stance and then keeping you in a double closed kinetic chain, and then opening you up and being able to use dynamic stability. That's all stuff that's the reason why your squat looks so good. That hip stability, the shoulder stability, being able to link that stuff up again. I think that's a key determining factor on why the movement patterns are so much more smooth, so much more controlled, and you're actually getting a whole lot more out of them without a lot of repercussion. Mm-hmm. And it's little stuff, it's like little stuff like getting up off the ground, going into a fucking split stance, but that stuff compounding over time, it just ends up showing up where we need it the most. Mm-hmm. That's really the goal for it. Nobody wants to do that stuff, but when you see a result, nobody needs more motivation. They need more results. If you can see a result, it's very easy to buy into some of this stuff.
Yeah, that's why I always make fun of the grind and beast mode and all the other kind of stuff, because the majority of it's just the day-to-day normal stuff that you just have to do. Like I told you the first time that we met, I won't like most of this shit. It doesn't mean I'm not going to do it.
Right.
That's how work gets done, is by doing the shit you don't want to do. Anybody can do the shit that they like to do or they want to do, but that makes up so much or so little of what the end result isn't anything. That I talk about execution a lot. You got to be able to execute, but people don't understand the execution is all the shit that you don't want to do. Yep. And that's not shit you delegate. You just have to do it. It's just
more so than doing it. I think you had a light bulb moment in those glute extensions because you were doing them, you were bullshitting them, probably for like 5 to 6 weeks. You're just bullshitting the reps and thinking like, these are stupid. I don't feel anything. I'm not getting anything out of them. As soon as you took that video and you dialed in your form, all of a sudden you're like, light bulb moment, new motor skill. You actually cleaned it up to the point where, again, that could transfer. Before, if you don't want to do something, this is everybody. You kind of bullshit it. You go through and you just go through the motions instead of actually putting a key focus on it.
I would say in my case it was ignorance, then it was stupidity, because I always say that you either don't care, you're ignorant, or you're stupid. It's one of 3 reasons why you're not doing something. I cared, I thought I was doing the right thing, but it was ignorant until I actually saw what was going on. It's same thing kind of happened with the plank, where my whole life I've always made fun of planks. So I figured it's just a static position. So what? Just go do something where you're moving, until one of your videos was talking about, when you're out here and you said you got to pull your elbows down and you got to pull your toes up. It's like, oh, fuck. Yeah. This is not a plank. This is not what I thought a plank was. So it was the ignorance. So I think that
it happens with experience too. You got to experience it to make those changes, because you could look at a video, you could read an article on something, unless you actually put it into a training program and play with it and experience what something's supposed to be, it's really hard to get a training effect from something like that. Because you could sit there in a plank, bullshit it passively, or you could do what you learned how to do, was bring full body tension and torque output in and literally escalate your tension to the point where all your vital metrics were just rising off of 15 seconds.
Yeah, then from that point on, I'll read somebody saying, I did 30, 45 seconds of planks. I'm like, that's bullshit. Yeah. That would be the same as some, a bodybuilder holding an ab pose on stage for 40 seconds. It's not going to happen. Right. They're going to pass out, No doubt. It's just not going to happen. Or they're doing it differently. Just they're doing it more from a static isometric contraction. Probably more so the lats than anything else, but you learn, as you said, as you go through. So if there's, I'm looking for takeaways, because everybody wants to watch this stuff and kind of duplicate it, but they can't duplicate it because they're not in the same position that I'm in the same medical position I'm in, same orthopedic position I'm in. But if there's a takeaway, it can be, if you're going to do any new exercise that's out there, look at the different means on how you can do it, how you can change the contraction, because the contraction in this case was night and day.
Right.
Going from something that was more of a, I don't want to say an isometric, almost a quasi-isometric to, static, which is huge, or using the Weider peak contraction principle.
I think something like, to make it very, very simple, when you're implementing anything new you have to learn how to maximize full body tension first. So 100% internal base tension. Learn how to maximize it, bring as many units in as you possibly can. That's step one. Step two is grading it down to actually get it to the point where you can be agile with it. So that's like the second phase, but usually people don't ever make it to that first step, where they learn what they have at their capabilities in terms of the internal tension that they can create, the stability that they can create. Once we can do that, we can grade it down and have less, maybe 50% of your maximal voluntary contractions full body, just so we can be smoother and actually have dynamic stability then. And that's the number one motor skill that I wish people had more of, is controlled dynamic stability. Meaning that they can move through ranges of motion, controlled ranges of motion, but almost have like a graded co-contraction around whatever that dynamic component of the movement pattern is, whether we're talking about compound movement patterns or whether we're talking about an isolative corrective exercise. That ability just to bring in as many as possible and then to bring it back down to the point where we can be smooth with it. It's very simple, but that's the number one thing that I've seen over my career that really carries over into really everything from strength to power to resilience and longevity.
Yeah, I like the way that you've explained that, because it's always been explained to me since the 90s. You have to be able to stabilize force before you can absorb force, before you can produce force.
Yep.
And that's kind of how I've always explained it. But you just explained it in a better way, the more practical way that I think most people are going to be able to understand.
Right.
Is the same concept applies if it's from physical therapy all the way. This is how you train people how to squat. This is how you train people how to do a push-up. It's how you train everything.
Yep.
If you can't stabilize, you're fucked. I mean, this is how they train you when you're talking about, if you're in a hospital for 4 weeks, the first thing they're going to train you to do is to stand up and stabilize.
Yep.
You got to stabilize before you can, and then how to sit down.
This is a very misunderstood concept, though, because there's two sides of the equation. People argue mobility before stability and then stability before mobility. But the way that people misconstrue this is that you have a normalized developmental sequence that every child goes through. What does a 1-week-old do first? Moves their head, right? Mobility, and then they learn how to stabilize it. So that's one thing. But we fucked all that up by going through sitting for hours a day, eating like shit, not training correctly, and having decades and decades of that. So we're truly in need of restabilizing everything so we can unlock the inherent mobility that we have. So we're not babies anymore, we're adults now, and we've desensitized our systems actually moving correctly. So many times, this was a key focus with you, with those 3 big focuses that we had. A vast majority of it was enhancing dynamic stability. And that started first with static stability with maximal voluntary contractions, and then grading it back out. But everyone's trying to chase that mobility as a fix-all. And truly it's not. If we can just restabilize, especially the things that people are trying to get more mobile in, which are their hips and their shoulders, those are the 2 most mobile segments inherently that the body has to offer. We just need better stability. We need better sequencing, smoothness in these regions so we can just use them a little bit better.
Yeah.
We have the tools, we just need the software.
Mm-hmm. I think you asked earlier about questions that you've been getting in regards to my nutritional protocol. I really don't have a nutritional protocol, but I can say this much. I've kind of put out this misconception over the past few years, but people don't realize that the majority, if I'm 50 years old, the majority of my life has been eating way healthier than most people do. So I grew up in a household that my mother shopped at a health food store. That's where our food came from. So it was all healthy foods, healthy dinner. If I wanted ho-hos, this is probably where the binging comes from. I just take $1, walk to the grocery store, eat the ho-hos behind the store, and eat the whole box, and then throw it away and make sure no wrappers came home. You know, so that was pretty much all through, you know, high school. Then from there, you know, I went to college, which was powerlifting, but still I went into bodybuilding. So then it was the chicken and rice and chicken and meat, you know, which is becoming popular again. You know, everything goes in its phases. It's the new thing, the same shit I was doing in 87. And it wasn't until my weight couldn't get any heavier, where it was right around 260, 270. And Louis wanted me at 308. I'm not gonna say he forced me to be 308. I wanted to lift at the best leverages I could lift at. And being my height, that was gonna provide the best leverages for the structure I have. That's when things started to go astray, because you can't, the way I was trying to do it at the time, and this is before, I mean, back then oils were bad, fats were bad. So the last thing I was gonna do is to start pumping all this bad shit. Like, I would have drank in a gallon of oil, you know, or the peanut butter and all that. It's just low fat was the thing, you know, so to avoid that. I couldn't gain the weight healthy eating, so that's when all the other stuff came in, and that's where the JM diet, and people have made this false assumption, and I haven't done anything to try to clear it up, you know, that's how I've ate my whole life, and it's not how I've eaten my whole life. I have a very strong tendency to undereat than I do to overeat in a big way. So all of 2017, my weight got all the way down to in the 250-ish, just because I didn't eat. You know, I may eat peanut butter crackers for lunch, and then that would be it. You know, something like that, just loss of appetite. I would rather be hungry than be full. And it's just different people have different mindsets on that. So maybe 5 years did I have to force feed myself into oblivion to be able to compete at the weight I would compete at. So it's not like I'm running this high risk of diabetes and all this other stuff. Now, when I did do the blood work that I wrote about for Berardi, was probably at the all-time worst of trying to push that outer envelope, because I couldn't get over 292 no matter what I did. So then it was a matter of get to 292, then bloat up as much as you possibly can the last week. And then finding the most efficient ways to bloat, which I've made videos on that, you know, as well. But obviously the older you get, your metabolism and everything shifts and changes and so forth. So all I've really done since we started this process, and Serrano is a big part of this whole thing as well. So the first overriding goal was just to feel better, you know, not complete. Nobody's got false expectations here now, you know, a complete elimination of pain and feeling great all the time. Everybody is on the same page and the same table of this is a long process. So let's just, from his side, let's just get Dave feel better.
Yep.
So don't fucking change a lot of what you're doing. Just try to get your calories up, you know, so when you do go, if you're somebody that is like myself and you don't eat a lot, and you were to track your calories over a period of time, it's probably 1,800, 2,200 at a body weight of 280 pounds. That's probably great for digestive health, because there's not a lot of food.
Yeah.
And I was more concerned about that. Regardless of the food, if there's not a lot going through there, that's really good for digestion. I don't care how toxic the foods are. If it's not going through 24/7, say you're eating every 2 hours, I don't care how fast it digests, your digestive system's still getting pounded all day. You know, so to give it a break, that's kind of why there's fasting.
So when we brought you in, you're at 283 10 weeks ago, really not eating a whole lot, like you said, just like not wanting to eat, just kind of deconditioned down. What's the current weight at?
272, that might fluctuate to 278.
And that's actually up a couple of pounds from like 6 weeks ago, right?
Oh yeah.
Because of...
Yeah, it was 68 to 72. But when there was the more the consistent walking, it was keeping a lot of the water and stuff off. But the calories that I'm pulling in are probably closer to 4,500. Yep. So it's almost, I would optimally like to see it to be 5,000, 5,500. I think 6,000 is going to push it too much before I begin to start thinking about a deficit. You know, because when you diet to try to lose weight or to try to get leaner, which is part of this overall plan,
Right.
you want to make sure you start at the highest base you can.
Right.
You know, I don't want to start, imagine if I had to start 1,800 and then you drop 200. I mean, next thing you know, you're at 1,000 calories. If I can start at 4,500, you know,
Right.
then I'll never have to go lower than 3,500, if that.
I think it's important to reiterate on this. You were going from like 2,200, you doubled that up, and you're down 13 pounds just because the activity is a little bit more well structured. Again, you have a more well-rounded program in terms of your max effort days, in terms of your accessory work. And then one of the big red flags that we had was just energy systems development, being able to get some base cardio in. That all matters.
Yeah.
That matters hugely. So, I mean, people are going to go, oh, that's bullshit. How can you eat twice as much and lose 13 pounds in 10 weeks?
When you're super deconditioned, and I mean, it's, your arms look like paper mache, you know, and you know, there's a lot of muscle that comes back,
Yep.
you know, pretty fast with muscle memory. And then you're not, I'm not going to say I don't have pizza, you know, but the majority of the time I'm eating what I would consider clean and healthy foods. Everybody nowadays defines that differently. To me, I just define it as making wise choices.
Right.
You know, I think everybody, if they were to sit down and were to map out what's a wise choice, what's a bad choice nutritionally, most people would probably hit it 80% on the mark.
Right.
You know, I fail to really think our society is that stupid that they're gonna miss that often. Like, they know an apple's probably fucking better than an Oreo. All right, when that's not even discussing, well, fructose is bad for you. You know, the fucking apple's still better than an Oreo. You know, so just those kind of things, you know, and trying to eliminate as much sugar as I possibly can. So there hasn't been any big dietary changes. Where the next dietary change, which will come in this phase, it's not going to be so much based upon to put muscle on or to lose fat. It's going to be to lower inflammation and to help with recovery, which in turn will have those side effects, but that's not the primary goal.
I think it's important to mention too that like a scientific process isolates one variable and tests one variable at a time. Many times people go in with the all or nothing approach. I'm going to start training, I'm going to go on a supplementation schedule, I'm going to start nutrition, I'm going to do all this stuff all together. And you have no idea what's actually yielding the positive benefit. So for us over the last 10 weeks, the new variable that we had in play was your training program. We know that the training program yielded positive benefits. Now we keep that variable and we keep on fine-tuning that variable, but we can introduce new variables in play that will synergize with what we already tested.
Yes.
So that's where the nutrition comes in. That's where the supplementation with Dr. Serrano comes in. We can get little by little better, but it doesn't happen in 1 week or 2 weeks. It happens in blocks of training or blocks of life. You know, we have 3 months of testing now that we can look at in terms of training. And I feel okay with, yeah, we've stabilized you right now. We know what next steps to make, which we're gonna go over here this trip out to Elite FTS. But the other thing is that we're bringing in other specialists here too. You know, Dr. Serrano's world class at what he does. We're both very fortunate to have him on our team and really dialing this stuff in, because that's really going to be what you said will reduce inflammation, will increase what we want to do in terms of your body composition, but also get us on the right path of our ultimate goal of feeling better, pain reduction, and lifestyle enhancement.
Yeah, and I think that breaking it out this way is, while you were speaking, I said you can't, but that's actually not true. You can. And that's what most competitive bodybuilders and powerlifters do. It's like, okay, what do I need to do to get to the starting gate? I'm at the starting gate, boom, start. And then you dump all those variables on, and then you run, and then the meet's over, you let it go.
Yep.
That's the problem that I've had since retiring from powerlifting is, what's the next goal? What's the starting date? Boom, go. You know, so everything comes on. Now when it's coming on in phases, if it is to untangle, it's going to untangle in phases instead of just meet, done, you know, and start over. So this, I think, from a longevity standpoint, is from my experience of trying to start the longevity thing many times, is the biggest variable that's different than what I've done before. And while it's on purpose on your part, it's on purpose on Serrano's part, it's completely on accident on my part, because I never expected to be as deconditioned as I was, that, oh shit, I have to get in shape just to be able to start thinking about getting in shape, and I have to, eat no matter what it is, just to be able to get food, for nutrients,
right?
To be able to move forward with that, which I think that's another takeaway that listeners can use, that's not so dialed into one patient protocol type of thing.
Yeah. Now, speaking to, our original goal was to reduce pain levels. When we first sat down at this very table 10 weeks ago, you're at like a 6.5 out of 10 on a daily basis waking up. Kind of where are you at right now in terms of that subjective out of 10 scale?
Right now, I'd say it's a 4.5 to a 3.5, but when I was giving you the updates before things fell off, we were between 2.5 and 3.5.
Yep.
So we're not far off. I think the biggest factor there is not having the daily movement like I had, which threw that off, but it's still cut completely in half, which leads me to believe, I don't know, I'm pausing, which tells me I don't, maybe it's possible, maybe I can get to the point where I wake up in the morning and there's no pain, where, that would be the ultimate goal, but I don't want to go in with false expectations. But I wouldn't have paused during that statement if I didn't think it was possible.
I like Tiger Woods, like fist pumped when you gave me that check-in that you're like, yeah, like real matter of fact, 2.5 out of 10, 2 weeks in a row. I was like, okay. That's some huge change. That's a huge change in the amount of time that we've been actually training. And possibilities are endless with that. But people try to discount daily activities or daily positions, going out for a 10-minute walk. It's important. Oh man, is it important. And literally you just said you went from a 3.5 to a 4.5 currently to previously a 2.5 to a 3.5. I mean, that's 1 to 2 points. That's 10 to 20% on basically not walking those other 3 to 4 days a week.
Yeah.
That's basically the difference.
Yeah, and pain is, obviously it's very subjective.
Right.
So to put some indicators out there to help define this for people, when it's bad, when it's a 6, and I go to step out of bed, the plantar fasciitis is so bad that I cannot walk to the bathroom. I have to sit there, take a few steps, stop, and hold on to, the TV counter or whatever it is, stretch my feet out, try to get it to be able to move. And I don't want to spend the next hour going from feet to head, but pretty much the hips are good, but they're prosthetic, so I have no problem there, thank God. But then the neck, and then if there's anything that still lingers, it is the neck, and I don't know how much groundwork we're going to be able to make on that, but it's stemming from the shoulder, and it will shoot up to the neck and around my eye, and sometimes it will get so bad that there's a migraine for 2 or 3 hours, from that standpoint. But that's typically always there at a low grade now, whereas before it would have been something that I had to sit, for an hour, take a Vicodin and let it chill before I could even think about, and then everything that's in between. But a lot of everything's the shoulder is the shoulder. So I could go through every single thing, but we're not talking about just waking up and be like, oh, my mid back is sore or my shoulders are sore from training. It's like, no, I can't walk across the fucking room when it's bad. And then what do I need to do, to get ready to be able to leave the house, which would be, rubbing my foot on a spiky ball or a, golf ball for 10 minutes just to open the feet up to be able to get into the shower, to where the shower could then open everything else up. And then from there, there's like a whole process that I had that I don't even use that process. So I use the spiky ball on my feet when I take meds, supplements at morning and night, because it's just in my bag and it's just part of the thing. And I don't have to though. And it's not a fucking golf ball. Like anybody who's had any kind of plantar fasciitis or, heel spurs or anything like that. There's a big difference between a spiky ball and a golf ball. Just to let y'all know, the golf ball hurts like a motherfucker. The other one, it hurts, but it's not the same thing. Some people are shaking their head, oh yeah, I understand that, but I'm telling you. And then before bed, having to use a softball throughout my whole rotator cuff on the right side and neck, just to be able to get sleep, which I haven't had to do that for a long period of time.
Those are two things, your morning routines and then your night routines. You were spending a lot of time just to get feeling good enough to continue on with your day. Like, we started this conversation with you as a high performance person in business and life. Those are hours that you're wasting a day on some of this shit. But being able to simplify that process, because you don't need to have to do it, you're saving hours a day, you're saving your frustrations. Like, it sucks being in rehab purgatory and having to do that stuff to yourself every single day. But ultimately, what I'd like to see over like the 2018 year is for your training, your warm-ups, your cool downs to be the only daily maintenance that you need.
Yeah.
Like, training is going to become your rehab and your maintenance.
It's close right now. I would say, depends how the next phase kind of comes together. 1 or 2 phases away from probably being able to do the restoration program as soon as I wake up.
Yep.
Which, I mean, that's kind of been a goal of mine, is to wake up, hit the floor, go through this, and be able to do it, where I know I couldn't do it now.
Right.
Because it would just take way too long. It would just be way too much. But it's there. It's like it's like at the end of the table. It's like right there. It's very close. A couple more movement-based stuff. Get the walking in there right when I get up, and then get movement before that a little bit.
Right.
Then it's definitely there. And I am to a point where I do think I can get up and move, where for a while after the hip, during the rehab, I was getting up and just going straight outside and walking. Being in Ohio, it was summer, so it was okay, but being in Ohio, can be
beautiful day out there today.
Yeah, it sucks all the time. So it's like, sometimes I'm like, oh shit. But there is, the walking and is in there now, which the only thing I haven't filmed is him following me walking through the trail, so.
The other thing I just want to touch upon is, I don't know whether you did this on purpose or not, or I was talking to your wife as I was training this morning, and we were kind of talking about some stuff with your progress, and seeing big changes here. But the biggest change to me was you having the confidence to actually put up training videos again. I hadn't seen a training video from you in, 9 months. And all of a sudden, I think it was 3 weeks in a row, training video. Like, they were funny, like the captions were priceless, but you were confident enough to go like, I know this looks good. I know I'm performing well. I know this is something that I've worked hard at. I'm going to put it out there to 300,000 followers, whatever you have. Yeah. I feel good about that. And then seeing people that have followed you like a god for 20 years go, oh, good job, Dave. This is amazing, Dave. Keep us posted, Dave. Unbelievable. Like, do you see that squat depth? Everyone's talking positively about it. Like, I was blown away because I read all the comments there just to see if anyone's talking shit. But
well, they sent me the DMs. So.
It was good, and that was something that when you're not feeling good, the last place that you want to go is out in the public sector and broadcast yourself to everybody. But I think that you were feeling good enough to have the confidence internally to be like, this process is going well. I'm making some huge changes here, and I'm fucking proud of myself making these changes. Here it is. And everyone going, oh yeah, we see it too. So that was a big takeaway for me, even in the last couple weeks. Like, it was with some tongue in cheek, but everyone's noticing the difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's
your
all
wife is, your staff is, I am, you definitely are, and you're living with yourself on a daily basis where you see incremental change on a daily basis. Me coming 10 weeks later, seeing you walk in, even your body composition's different, your movement's different, the way that you're sitting here is different, energy level's different. Somebody that's as close to you as your wife, noticing huge amounts of change. Like, I'm thrilled, but I know that this is just a start.
Well, she's just happy that I can do the laundry.
That was one of your big things. You were like, man, I cannot get down on my knees and change the laundry to the dryer.
Yeah.
Are you doing that now?
I can.
You can.
I have.
Yeah.
I have. The posting, to me, I wouldn't say it's so much validation is, it's a lot of people were asking about the progress.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big gap, and they
thought you were doing yoga or something.
Well, they didn't know really what was going on. They thought I was in rehab purgatory. That all I was doing was that, and they weren't understanding that there was a lot of content that was filmed.
Right.
To be able to put out, and then the process of being able to put out all the content. So I wanted to try to fill some of the gaps with that.
Yep.
But then, to me, the lifts all still suck, but my gauge is different, than what other people's are. But to be able to do the lifts, and the first phase was a little spotty, trying to figure out how to fit some of the stuff in there, as far as little back twinges and little things that kind of happen until that kind of worked its flow into it. But they don't hurt, to do the lifts, which is a whole nother thing, because it's there's no duct tape required, all the other fun stuff that goes along with that. So from that standpoint, it was kind of putting it out there, but then when I put it out there tongue in cheek, it cracked me up, because people don't know how to take it. And then I started to lose followers, and I kind of do want to lose followers to that tonight. And so then it kind of became that. So I wouldn't say the videos are like inspiring me to post more videos, because to me, it's still a pain in the ass. So I don't know how many more they'll continue to be posted, unless it's a different movement.
I took it as just a metaphor. Like, I don't really give a shit what was on the videos. I care that they actually came out, and that it was sort of a validation. It wasn't about anyone else. It was about validation to yourself. Like, you've gone through this process. I keep on saying 10 weeks here, but it should be told that it took about 3 weeks to get into the program itself. So we had like an on-ramping period where you're only doing a lift to 3 lifts a week, and then truly at like week 4. So you've only had like truly 4 to 5 pure weeks of training, and then a couple weeks on your own here.
I think it's fair to state that my level of conditioning was lower than you expected it to be once I got going into it.
Yeah.
So it was, that ramp up was probably fair to say. It was definitely 3 weeks easy, and even with that, still the aerobic capacity stuff is still going to take a little more catching up,
no doubt,
before all of that comes all through. But once it's stabilized, once it works itself out, once the max effort stuff and the dynamic stuff kind of figured its way out, and I kind of figured how to navigate that, on my end. I'm kind of only responsible for one little nugget here, but it's kind of hard to navigate that area, which I think we have as separate topics to discuss. So I'll wait for that. Took a little time, but now it's kind of unfolded, to where it's going to be cake. Progressing, because the base is kind of laid.
Yeah. And we know what works because we tested it. Yeah. We know what works. So doing more of what works is how you make progress.
Yeah, exactly.
Very simple.
Yeah, it's easy. He's going to be flying back home thinking, I had that Dave Tate motherfucker laying on the floor doing hip thrusts and pads. Ain't nobody else ever done that.
Did you get a pump in the butt there?